Hey everybody!
Hey.
Welcome to Pastor Besties. I'm Nicole.
I'm Melissa.
And today we are talking about new appointments.
Maybe you've been in a pastoral change. Maybe your church has gotten a new pastor. Maybe you're a new pastor. And so we're going to talk a little bit about our experiences, our recent experiences.
Yes, both from a different side of the coin.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting.
Yeah.
So stick with us.
On
Hashtag Pastor Besties. So, Melissa, you've recently been through a pastoral transition.
I have, yes.
And I've recently experienced a pastoral transition at our church. I didn't transition, but we brought on a new pastor and said farewell to one. So
Yeah.
it happens, right? We're Methodists. This is how we roll. We are in the appointment game, which I feel like if you're not Methodist, you probably don't understand.
It's a very different process. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe just like a crash course in appointments and why did we choose an appointive system, right? And what's great about it?
So, crash course and how it happens. January. Around January, actually, is when a lot of cabinets start working on appointments. I don't know, it's different for each annual conference. About November is when, in our annual conference, we're asked to sort of declare if we're seeking a new appointment or if a church is seeking a new appointment, a new pastor. And then around January is when the cabinet, which is the bishops and the district superintendents, they start working on matching people with their gifts
going to
and
go.
graces, and and so July 1st is usually Methodist New Year when new pastors start. So any time between that January to like June-ish time frame.
Hopefully not June. That's so late.
Well,
but it happens, I guess.
Yeah, ours was pretty late this year. I had a late appointment announcement once. It was after annual conference. So yeah, it happens. It's not the norm necessarily. But,
yeah, that'd be terrible.
But it happens. So between that time frame, you kind of, if you have put your name forward as, wanting to move or ready to move or experience something new, or if your church has, you sort of know to expect a phone call. Sometimes those phone calls come and you were not expecting them.
That's what happened to me when I received my second appointment.
Yeah,
Got a phone call from the DS and you look down and you're like, oh no. What?
Yeah, it is like nerve-wracking during this time too. Like when there was one time that I think I was in an appointment for like a year, and another district superintendent called me. And it was about something completely unrelated, but it was like appointment season. I was like, I don't want to answer.
I had a DS call me, my DS. I was sick and he called to like check in on me.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that. And so I was like, no.
Yeah.
And he was like, hey, just wanted to call and check in. I'm like, check in about what? He's like, aren't you sick?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but it's appointment season. He's like, dang it, everybody hates getting phone calls from me. I'm like, maybe a text beforehand to just say, I'm going to call you, not about an appointment.
Yeah. I had one time.
I'm very anxious.
Yeah. I had one time a district superintendent texted me at the last minute, was like, hey, I'm in your town. Want to have lunch? And I was like, oh my gosh. No, I know them really well. And so it's actually not that uncommon, but I walked in the restaurant and the look on my face must've been because she went, oh, this is no business, just personal.
Everybody just assumes that DSs have these ulterior motives that always have to do with appointments.
Yeah. No, they don't.
No, they don't.
They're people too.
We're just anxious people.
Yeah. So that's a little bit about the process, and different annual conferences have it work differently.
And I know, if you're not familiar with the appointive system, you think why would you let somebody else choose your appointment and where you're going to work and where you're going to live? And I get that. And sometimes it's a little scary to give up that kind of trust.
It is, yeah.
But there's also really great reasons to do that, which is a church is never without a pastor, or hardly ever without a pastor. There's always a pastor to appoint there, and a pastor is never without a church. So you know, there are some churches that on the call system can go years without finding a pastor for their flock, and we don't have to deal with that, which is like, I think a big benefit to the appointment system.
And it's not random either. Like,
No.
it's not like, oh, you should go here. Like, there's a big consultation, both with the clergy and with the churches, to say, what are your gifts and graces? What are you looking for in a pastor? What do you need in a pastor? So it's not just like, man, we'll put this person here because you have to have someone.
Yeah, I would say I've only had 2 appointments. I've been like a long-termer at both, but they've gotten it right both times for me.
Yeah.
So I can't like complain. And I know that doesn't happen for everybody, but I think that for most people it does.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I guess you wouldn't stay in the appointment system.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you've had 4 appointments.
This is my 4th appointment, yeah.
You had twice as many appointments as me, and you've only been in ministry 1 more year than me.
I know, it's kind of
Not weird.
It is strange. And at the same time, for almost all of the appointments, for all of the appointments, it's been like, okay, it's a good time.
I think your case is probably more the norm than my case. Like, I think people that have about our year's experience probably have 3 to 4 appointments under their belt rather than 2.
Sometimes, yeah. I think that's true. I think sometimes it's both like trying to figure out what your gifts and graces are and getting a good fit. And also, I mean, just life, of just trying to figure out life and how it all works. So, yeah.
Appointments are fun, is what we're saying.
They are, actually. I mean, again, I've had 4 good appointments.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
We're lucky.
Yeah. But I know, for me, again, this is my 4th time doing this, and there's things that, as I've been in it, I was like, oh yeah, that's a thing. You know, like one of the things that, you're learning so much when you're in a new place.
Yes.
Yes. You're learning all the things. You're learning people and their relationships and how they're related to each other, and who's in leadership of the church, and then who's officially in leadership, and then who's...
I thought you were going to say who's in love with each other, and you said who's in leadership.
Sometimes who's in love with each other. I mean, you sometimes learn those things too. Like
True.
Just and just how things work at the church.
Yes.
And how they don't work. And I mean,
yes, because every church is different, and every church does things differently.
Yeah.
And,
And it's a lot to learn. And I forgot how tired I get.
Oh yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's
the information download.
And I was talking with someone who was like, "Oh, you have a lot to learn," and then it's something sort of clicked in them. They're like, "You have to learn a new town too." I was like, "Yeah, like where are the hospitals? Do I have to get a new doctor?" I didn't move too far away, so a lot of my stuff doesn't change, like my doctor,
Praise hands for
my
that.
hairstylist, the important things. A lot of those things don't change. Even where I do a lot of grocery shopping, I can still do.
Oh, that's good.
It's kind of out of the way, but if I'm in the area, it's not out of the realm of possibility. So there's some things that for me didn't change, but that changes at a new appointment. Like you have to get used to all those things. And sometimes a new bank, a new doctor, a new hairstylist, a new grocery store, a new route to meetings. It's just all the newness. And
new favorite restaurants, new everything.
Right.
It's overwhelming.
It is.
I mean, just as any move is overwhelming, right? But you know, when you move and you're starting a new job, it's
that's like the 2 major life stresses: start a new job and move. So
then getting married, which you've decided to add on top of all of that.
Yeah, so I've got 3 of the major life stresses, and also the life joys, like for real, like legitly. But
Yay.
It is, yay. But it is a lot, like all the things at once, and so I forget how tired I get.
Yeah.
And just how exhausted and drained I feel. I'm really excited, but also like I need a nap every day.
Right. I think that's one of the things, as a person who has stayed on staff, we've had 2 pastoral transitions 2 years in a row. So it's been, I think, a lot for the church, a lot for the staff. And I think one of the things I tried to be very conscious about the first time through was, we can't give you everything all at once. So we would tell the pastor, we have this basket full of information, and we're going to take things out of the basket every once in a while and like let you like learn as we go. But if we just, I mean, we would just be sitting in meetings for days if we were trying to tell him everything, and that's craziness.
Right.
But I'm finding that a year into his new appointment, we're still pulling things out of the basket, and like starting to a brand new basket for the other associate who transitioned. So it's like all the baskets, all the things, and like I underestimate like how much I have to like stop and explain things because otherwise like it makes no sense, and it's so rude if you don't, like you're just like just do it because this is how we do it, like to take the time and explain things and to let people know like here's why, not that we can't change it, but this is how we've come to this place in ministry.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, it is. And I think even, you know, I think it does take more than a year to get to know things.
Oh,
I mean,
totally.
you know, when you've been through a Christmas, you've been through a Christmas. And so you can go, oh, well, we did it this way last year, but that's not necessarily how we do it. And so I think it takes, I mean, multiple years to be like, oh, okay, this is how we do things.
Yeah, absolutely it does, especially for those things like Christmas and Easter that only come up once a year. Like, you know, you kind of get worship down and you kind of get that down pat because you're doing that every week. But the things that you're only doing once a year, it's easy to like forget your second year in, like, oh, gosh, we did do that and I forgot and we're not prepared for that now. And so it's easy to drop things and forget things, and maybe that's okay in some circumstances, like it's okay, but in others it's like, whoops, that was a big miss.
Right. Well, I folks here at my new appointment have said over and over, like, I hope this is not overwhelming for you. And I think that it would be really easy as a pastor to say, oh, no, it's fine. But I've been honest and I'm like, no, it is. It is overwhelming. But
It's okay.
It's okay. I mean, like, that's normal. If you are like, no, this seems great.
You're probably not doing enough.
Or
you're not learning enough.
Yeah, or you're just trying to pretend. It's okay to be overwhelmed.
Yeah, I think you have to be vulnerable with people.
Yeah.
I try to live my life in vulnerability, like just in general, but when you are coming new into a place, I think it's important to say, hey, I don't understand why we do this. Can you explain it to me? Or, you know, ask all the questions. All the questions. Because you can't learn if you don't ask.
Right.
And they're not going to be offended. You're new. No. And like, use that, like, as long as
I'm
you
just
can.
Learning. That's what I've been saying a lot, which is true. I'm just learning. I'm learning all the things, and I'm going to be learning all the things for a while. And again, people have been really good about that. And even some of the questions that you ask sometimes are things that they're like, oh, why do we do it that way? And maybe that's an opportunity to say, oh, we can try something different or try something new, or maybe it's not. Maybe it's, okay, so that doesn't work. So just I'm going to file that back and see where things go. Right. Yeah, I think one of the things that I had forgotten, and I think that I need to know I need to do, is to find a new spiritual director. To just help process through, to remember some of those spiritual rhythms of things that for me I need to do for my own spiritual life and my own thinking and processing through things. Maybe it's not a spiritual director that someone needs, but a therapist or a counselor, because it's a lot to go through. It's a lot to think about. It is,
and I think to be able to say that and to admit, like, I can't do this on my own. I need somebody else to help walk me through this. Yeah. And to just, like, check me when I need checked, but then also, like, encourage me when I need encouraged, because we don't want to expect our parishioners to do that for us. Yes. That's kind of inappropriate. Right. So if we can find somebody else that can help us, especially in life transition. Yeah. Man, so important.
Right. And I think that, you know, with spiritual director, therapist, counselor, whatever it is that you find, I think in addition to that, it's also really important to have friends who are outside the church. I mean, and not just your local congregation, I mean, of how you're in relationship with one another there, but to have people even outside of church in general is also really helpful.
This is the hardest part about new appointments, right? Because It's hard to make friends as an adult.
Yeah.
It's hard. Like, where do you go to make friends? You're not like meeting them on the schoolyard anymore.
Right.
You know, I've been in Springfield for 4 years now, and I just this past year have really connected and made a really good friend in a local funeral director, which I know sounds kind of strange, but you know what? I'm not his pastor, and we're in similar fields, like helping people fields. So like, we get it when we have to cancel things last minute because something came up, you know. We live kind of a similar busyness sort of schedule, and it's awesome to have somebody who gets what I do without being in my congregation or being another pastor. Like, it's just like the best. It's the best. It's so life-giving to me, and I wasn't really anticipating it, but I'm really grateful for a friend that I can just get together and eat Thai food with, and like just be, you know. And when we work a funeral together, it's super fun.
Yeah, there's that too. Yeah, it is. You know, it's just, I think that's what's important to remember, is that it's so much, and you don't have to do it all at once.
Yeah.
That it's a lot of things that you'll learn along the way, and so be gentle and be patient with yourself. And I do think, I think you're right about the vulnerability. It's important to, I mean, perhaps you don't want to like, you don't want to say that in your sermon on Sunday morning, like, I'm overwhelmed, everybody. Like, you don't want to be anxious about it. But again, you know, like I've said, yeah, I am overwhelmed. And it's okay. I mean, it's just going to take time.
It's best to come in and be who you are, and for them to understand where you are, rather than trying to be like Superwoman, and then like a year in, they're like, well, why are you having trouble now? We thought you were fine.
We thought you had it all together.
Yeah,
well,
that's no
no,
good.
I'm a hot mess all the time. Most of the time. All the time. Most of the time.
Mostly all of the time.
Mostly all the time. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's a lot. It's a lot to deal with.
It is a lot. And I think if you aren't a pastor, but you are a parishioner,
oh, yes.
like, be gentle with your pastor. And you know what? Like, be just like so kind to them and gracious when you need to, because they're learning so much. And maybe like,
well, and I think that it is true of congregations too. You know, I think that it is in a transition of any kind. Whether you're receiving a new pastor or you are the new pastor, there's this mix of grief and excitement.
Oh, yes.
As a pastor, you're grieving where you came from, and you're grieving all of those losses. You know, even if it is the loss of a grocery store. I mean, that's the loss of something. If it's the loss of a friendship, or you know, you're grieving those losses. And as a congregation, you're grieving the loss of a pastor. Even, I mean, especially if it was someone, a pastor who was well liked or well loved. I mean, that's
walked you through a particularly difficult time in your life.
Or even if it wasn't a pastor who was well liked or well loved, but walked you through a difficult time, or there were things that it was like, oh, but they just said it this way, and I miss that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of grief that goes along with it. And there's also the excitement of what new is going to happen. Maybe new adventures. Am I going to hear the gospel proclaimed differently? Am I going to be challenged in my faith?
Ministry.
What new ministries are going to be?
Possibilities,
like, what hopes and dreams do we have for the future? That maybe that thing that we've always wanted is going to come here, or something. I mean, so it's this weird tension of like grief and excitement at the same time.
Yeah.
Of holding those together.
And it's weird to hold them together, but like, it's okay.
Yeah.
And maybe we don't really experience that in life in other ways as we do in a church setting. But so it's kind of new, and it's hard because we've not really done that well maybe before.
Well, and I think that, you know, in that grieving process, a lot of times both churches and pastors are afraid to mention things like, oh, I don't want to tell you that the previous pastor did it this way and I really liked it, because I want you to do your own thing.
Right.
Or maybe they go above and beyond and do mention it all the time, like, oh, you're not the previous pastor. Which
we know that we're not the previous pastor.
We're aware.
And we know.
Yeah.
And we might be sensitive about it.
Maybe.
Or maybe not.
Maybe not. I mean, it depends. Like,
right.
So it's, personally, I'm not offended when someone, drops the name of a previous pastor or talks about how much they appreciated
Right,
their ministry.
absolutely.
It's like, that's great. And I don't take it personally to be like, oh, well, I'll never be that person.
Well, and we don't, like, I hope we don't come into a church and think like, new ministry starts with us
Yes.
and nothing before matters.
Yes.
And no, like that church has a history long
Right.
before us. It'll have a history
Absolutely.
long after us, and we're just a little blip on its
Yep.
screen.
Right.
It has nothing to do with us.
Right. I was that was advice that was given to me from a DS many years ago. Is always remember when you go to a church that God was there before you were there. God will be there with you while you're there, and God's going to be there long after you were. So you're joining in the journey together.
I love that.
So I think my biggest suggestions and reflections are: be gentle with yourself, be willing to be vulnerable. Take a nap if you need to.
Take all the naps. Take a day and just like go read something and get a cup of coffee.
Learn all the things. And so this maybe this is controversial. Maybe you reuse a sermon or two. I mean, I know context, like maybe you'll need to change some things, but they haven't heard them before. And if it's good, I mean, if it's not a good one, don't use it.
I actually had a DS tell me one time that you should save all your sermons and for the first 6 months at a new appointment, reuse your old sermons so that you can spend your time getting to know the congregation and the people instead of working on sermon writing.
Sure.
I haven't really done that, but I think that's a really interesting thought.
Yeah, I have redone series and used some of the work from previous series, but I do adapt it for context.
Oh, well, you always
and time.
have. Don't like preach the exact same sermon. That's creepy. Like, please rework it. But
a little bit, but it does save like your exegetical time. So feel free to do that, to do what it is that you need to care for your own soul in the midst of that.
that was a little controversial. No, it wasn't.
Well, some people do. Some
I
people
know.
are like, you never do that. I was like, well,
I mean, it can be a problem. Don't let it be a
yes.
problem.
Yeah, of course.
Don't take advantage of it.
No.
Yeah.
No. But yeah, keep learning and be gentle. Those are probably the biggest ones.
Good advice. Good thoughts.
Thank you.
And we're praying for you as you transition.
And you as well.
Thank you.
And you as well.
And you as well.
For whatever transitions you've experienced in your church, whether it's a new pastor or a new staff person, or if you are the new pastor or the new staff person, or maybe you're attending a new church for the first time. Those are transitions also, and there's grief and there's excitement in that too.
That's right. And allow yourself to feel it.
Feel all the feels.
That's right.
That's good life advice.
It really is.
Thank you. I said thank you before you even said it is, because I was just that proud of it. Feel all the feels. So may you feel all the feels. May you be gentle with yourself, and may you remember that God is with you every moment of every day and in every step of this journey.
See you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.